and we about to take off. Yeah, this is Airplane Flying Handbook, Chapter 6, Overview. So 20% of aviation accidents happen during takeoff departure, and half of those are caused by pilot error. Let's fix that. Let's talk about takeoff and departure. So let's understand the different phases of takeoff. You got 3 phases of takeoff. You got your takeoff roll, you got your liftoff, and initial climb. So takeoff is when the airplane accelerates from a standstill to liftoff speed, and then the airplane comes off the ground. Liftoff is when the airplane reaches a speed where lift exceeds weight, allowing the airplane to leave the ground. The pilot needs to make sure you rotate smoothly to establish a correct pitch attitude on the climb out. On the initial climb, you begin when the airplane becomes airborne and the pitch attitude is established. It's considered complete once you reach a safe altitude and transition to your en route climb speed. So there's some considerations when you're looking at your takeoff. And these are things that no matter what you're doing or what type of takeoff you're doing, that you want to consider. That's your performance planning. So you want to check your pilot operating handbook, look at your takeoff distance, your rotation speed, climb speed, so your VX and VY. Things you want to consider is like a high density altitude, which would cause a longer takeoff roll and reduce climb performance. And you want to make sure that you confirm that you have enough runway length to be able to get airborne if you have to stop on the runway. Every airplane has its own pre-flight takeoff checklist, and you want to make sure that you're properly doing the pre-takeoff checklist. Make sure you got the right engine instruments in the green, that your flaps are set accordingly, and you got trim for takeoff, and your controls are full, free, and correct. So you got good movement on your controls before you take off. Not a good thing if you don't. And then make sure you got good situational awareness. You want to make sure the runway's clear, you got the tower, you got a proper takeoff clearance. And if you're the non-towered, then you make sure you broadcast your intentions on CTAF. And then if there's large aircraft, make sure you're watching out for wake turbulence before rotating. Types of takeoff. One, you got a normal takeoff. On a normal takeoff, you line up on the runway center line, apply full power, and then you make sure you maintain directional control on the runway by using the rudder and making sure that you compensate for any left turning tendencies. At the rotate speed, you're going to smoothly apply back pressure to the yoke. Establish a climb of VX for your best climb or VY for your best rated climb. Then you retract the flaps and landing gear once you establish a positive rate. We look at this diagram here. It shows the initial roll. You're going to be straight on the runway, and then once you get ready to actually rotate, you're going to have a takeoff attitude where the nose is up and the airplane will start to lift off the ground. Now, the difference when you got the next thing, which is a crosswind takeoff, you're going to have a crosswind. This has to do with you have a crosswind to the left or to the right. Here's the thing. Almost every time you take off an airplane, you're going to have some type of crosswind. It might be light, might be heavy, but you will have a crosswind more times than not. So I would just plan that you're always taking a crosswind takeoff. What you're going to do, looking at this diagram, you're going to start with the aileron inputs to the wind. So if you have wind from your left, put the ailerons pointed to the left so you can prevent the upwind wing from lifting as you start to accelerate. Then as you accelerate, reduce the aileron input as flight controls become more effective. And you'll have to feel this and judge it, but if you have full left deflection in as you start to accelerate, you'll slowly start to pull some of it out. You'll keep the nose aligned with the runway using the rudder so you stay on the center line. And then once you start to lift off, just transition into a crab, which you kind of turn into the wind, where you track as you climb on the center line. Now, your wings will be level while you maintain the wind correction angle, so you're over the runway as you're taking off. This diagram has a good depiction of what it's like to take off into the wind. Now, this is what it looks like if you don't have a correction. Now you see that the airplane will get kind of pushed over, which can cause a problem. Might even have a wing strike on the opposite end. But if you have the proper correction in, you'll see that it'll keep the airplane from tipping over on the other side. One aspect of taking off is understanding what ground effect is. So ground effect is what seems like a cushion of air that occurs when you're flying close to the ground. It's typically within one wingspan of the altitude on the ground, and it's caused by reduced wingtip vortices, so less induced drag is better lift and performance. In ground effect, the airplane can lift under the ground below your rotate speed, but your climb performance will be poor. So if you get off the ground and you're in ground effect, the airplane will fly because you got less induced drag. Now, if you keep climbing and you get above the ground effect, the airplane might sink back down because you're at a lower speed than what your rotate speed is, and that induced drag is going to be back there because you're outside of ground effect. So you want to make sure you use the ground effect to build up speed before transitioning to the climb out outside of ground effect. If you're doing a short field takeoff, this is a max performance takeoff. And you're going to use this if you're climbing over an obstacle that's at the end of the runway. You want to use V, which is your best angle of climb speed. You'll line up at the beginning of the runway and you'll use whatever the recommended flap setting is for the aircraft. You'll hold the brakes, apply full power. You release the brakes. And when you release the brakes, you'll start accelerating down the runway. And when you get to VR, which is V rotate, you'll start to pitch back. Maintain a climb at V. So your best rate of, or your best angle of climb speed until clear of obstacle. And once you're over the obstacle, you'll transition, pitch the nose forward and climb out of your best rate of climb, which is VY. Retract the landing gear. Once the obstacle is cleared, have a positive rate established, you are winning. There's the depiction there. Rotate at VX, climb at VX, clear the obstacle and retract flaps and climb at VY. Now, this is kind of what I talked about. If you have a premature lift off where you lift off actually below VR while you're in the ground effect, you may lift off the ground, but once you get above the ground effect, the airplane will realize that it cannot maintain its climb at the speed that you rotate at, and it'll send back down. Next, let's look at the soft field takeoff, which if you're taking off on grass, gravel, or soft surface, you know how to do. You're going to use back pressure on the yoke and lightly on the nose wheel. So you'll pull onto the runway after you get all the clearance, as we talked about. You'll take up the full runway. As you're moving onto the runway, you'll keep moving. You don't want to stop, because if you're on grass or mud or anything like that, the airplane might just sink and get stuck. So continually move on as you enter the runway, and as you roll into the runway, add power and start going down the runway. Allow the aircraft to lift off the ground and make sure you have back pressure. That's the thing I forgot to tell you. Hold back pressure as you turn onto the runway, and as you add power, the airplane will start going. And as soon as the airplane gets just off the ground, release enough back pressure that it stays in the ground effect, and that you just above the ground, in ground effect, accelerating. You want to accelerate, accelerate, accelerate until you get to VX or VY. VX if you're trying to climb over an obstacle, or VY if it's clear and you're just trying to do a normal takeoff. Once you get out of ground effect, everything else becomes normal. You might be, in this case, it might be a crosswind, it might not be a crosswind, but you climb out and then you continue as if it's a normal takeoff. Some common errors that you want to make sure you avoid is if you're not compensating for the left turning tendencies that happen when you're flying piston aircraft. Don't over control the rudder or ailerons during the roll, and don't rotate too early. We already talked about that multiple times. Don't do that. Make sure that you're crabbing into the wind as you're taking off. And follow your PAs, follow the checklist. Make sure you're using the proper flap settings for the maneuver you're doing. So an emergency situation that you'll consider, there's two different scenarios that you can consider that could happen when you're getting ready for takeoff. One is something doesn't look right when you're getting ready to take off. You got to abort the takeoff, so reject the takeoff. If you have rejected takeoff, abort immediately. Abort, 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 throttle idle, brakes apply, and slow the airplane down, and then get off the runway. And if you lose the engine as soon as you get off the ground or after you're at takeoff, you're going to want to make sure you pitch for your best speed and maintain heading straight ahead. If you're above 1,000 feet, you may be able to turn back around and land at the airport. But if you're below 1,000 feet, find something straight ahead and land. You got to be safe. So keep your eyes on the horizon, not the instruments. Anticipate the left turning tendency. And if something don't feel right, just abort the takeoff and start over. Practice different types of takeoffs in different scenarios, in different conditions. That way, when you actually have to do it, you'll be ready to go. And that's it. Take off, take off, take off. Summary. KT